Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepless Campfire. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten frontiers of Alaska where the wilderness stretches beyond human comprehension, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. The largest state in America holds secrets beneath its permafrost, mysteries hidden in its endless nights, and encounters that defy logical explanation. In a land where nature dominates human existence, the line between reality and the unexplained often blurs into nothingness. Across these tundras, mountains, and isolated communities are accounts drawn from witness reports, official investigations, and archived broadcasts, each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. Alaska's brutal beauty masks something darker phenomena that have left even the most hardened wilderness experts questioning what they truly know about the last frontier. The stories we'll explore tonight come from different corners of this vast state, spanning decades of encounters with the unknown. From researchers stationed at remote outposts to indigenous elders passing down warnings, these accounts share a common thread of encounters that cannot be easily explained away by weather, wildlife, or human interference. What makes these Alaskan tales particularly disturbing is not just their content, but the credibility of those who experienced them, people familiar with the land's natural rhythms and ordinary dangers. These are individuals who know the difference between a bear's growl and something else entirely. In Alaska's extreme isolation, where help might be hundreds of miles away, the unexplained takes on a terrifying weight that urban dwellers can scarcely comprehend. Now, let us begin with our first story. It was late September of 2014 when experienced hiker Marcus Thorne set out for a solo trek through Denali National Park. At 42 years old, Thorne had completed challenging expeditions across 5 continents, but Alaska's wilderness held a special place in his heart. Born and raised in the mountainous regions of Colorado, Thorne had developed an early passion for wilderness exploration that would eventually define his life's purpose. As a geologist by training, he possessed both scientific knowledge and practical outdoor skills that made him uniquely qualified for solo expeditions in challenging environments. His previous journeys included traversing the Patagonian Andes, crossing the Australian outback, and circumnavigating Iceland's volcanic landscapes, experiences that had honed his survival instincts to a razor's edge. Friends and colleagues described him as meticulous and cautious, traits that had kept him safe during 2 decades of wilderness exploration. Thorne was known for his comprehensive preparation methods, which included studying topographical maps, analyzing weather patterns, and investing in equipment designed to withstand the most extreme conditions. For this particular journey, he had spent months preparing, filing detailed itineraries with park rangers, and updating his will before departure. His plan was straightforward: a 10-day circuit through the park's less-traveled western region, culminating in an ascent of Mount Alaskan before returning to civilization. What no one could have predicted was that Marcus Thorne would become one of Denali's most perplexing mysteries. The Denali expedition represented something more than just another adventure for Thorne. It was the fulfillment of a long-held dream to explore Alaska's interior wilderness during the transitional period between summer and winter. In his journal, which was later recovered from his vehicle, he wrote about his fascination with the edge seasons, when Alaska's landscape undergoes dramatic transformations. He had specifically chosen late September for this journey, seeking to experience the park during a time when most visitors had departed and the wilderness took on its most primal character. Thorne's equipment reflected his careful planning: a lightweight but sturdy tent designed to withstand high winds, a sleeping bag rated for extreme cold, and a satellite communication device that allowed him to transmit his location and status twice daily. His provisions included calorie-dense foods suitable for cold weather exertion, water purification systems, and emergency supplies sufficient for twice his planned duration. Thorne had also packed geological survey equipment, as he intended to collect rock samples from areas rarely visited by researchers. Friends who saw him off noted his characteristic calm confidence, tempered with the respect for nature's power that came from years of wilderness experience. As he entered the park registration office on that crisp September morning, none of the rangers on duty could have imagined they were witnessing the beginning of an enduring Alaskan mystery. The first few days of Thorne's expedition proceeded exactly as planned. Satellite communications showed him progressing along his intended route, with regular check-ins confirming his status. His transmissions included brief updates on weather conditions, wildlife sightings, and geological observations, all consistent with a routine expedition. The weather held unusually clear for late September, creating ideal hiking conditions with daytime temperatures hovering around 40 degrees Fahrenheit and clear night skies that offered spectacular views of the aurora borealis. On day 2, Thorne reported encountering a grizzly bear at a safe distance, noting in his transmission that the animal appeared to be preparing for hibernation. By day 3, he had successfully navigated through the challenging terrain of the Sanctuary River Basin, making camp near the base of Mount Alaskan. His final complete transmission came through at 6:17 p.m. on day 4, mentioning unusual animal tracks he had encountered near the river. Rangers noted the transmission was cut off mid-sentence, though such interruptions weren't uncommon in the park's remote sections where satellite signals could be disrupted by terrain or atmospheric conditions. When Thorne failed to check in the following morning, a search protocol was initiated according to standard procedure for overdue wilderness travelers. What rescuers found at Thorne's last known campsite would raise more questions than answers. His tent remained standing, though the entrance flap was partially open as if he had stepped out briefly. Inside, his sleeping bag was unrolled and arranged with military precision, while cooking equipment was laid out as if in preparation for a meal that was never made. A pot of water sat beside a cold camp stove, and a half-eaten energy bar lay on a flat rock nearby. Most disturbingly, his boots sat neatly by the tent entrance, positioned with their toes pointing outward in the way someone might place them, if expecting to put them on again soon. Thorne himself was nowhere to be found. Search teams would spend the next 3 weeks combing 100 square miles of terrain, utilizing helicopters, ground teams, and search dogs specifically trained for wilderness recovery operations. The weather, which had been so cooperative during Thorne's expedition, turned harsh, with snowstorms limiting visibility and complicating search efforts. Despite these challenges, searchers meticulously covered the area, finding only one additional clue: a single photograph on Thorne's camera showing a massive humanoid figure standing on a distant ridge, watching his campsite with what appeared to be an unnatural stillness. The image, time-stamped at 6:20 p.m. on the day of his final transmission, would become the focal point of the investigation into his disappearance. The photograph, when enlarged and enhanced by forensic experts, revealed details that deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The figure stood approximately 8 feet tall based on proportional analysis with surrounding terrain features, with a build that appeared both muscular and elongated. Its stance was unnaturally still, with an upright posture that didn't resemble the typical stance of bears or other known wildlife. Most puzzling was the figure's apparent awareness of being photographed. It faced directly toward Thorne's campsite with what some analysts interpreted as an unnerving quality of observation. Multiple wildlife biologists and photography experts examined the image without reaching a consensus about its subject. Some suggested it might be an optical illusion created by unusual rock formations and lighting conditions, while others pointed to details that suggested a biological entity. The photograph's metadata confirmed it had not been digitally altered, and the timestamp corresponded precisely with the period when Thorne's final transmission was cut off. This single image would become the most debated piece of evidence in a case that otherwise offered few concrete clues about what had happened to the experienced hiker. The official investigation into Thorne's disappearance, documented in Case File 2014 DNP-047, concluded with the sobering admission that no evidence of foul play, animal attack, or environmental exposure could be established. Search teams found no signs of struggle, no blood traces, and no evidence that Thorne had left his campsite in haste. The absence of footprints other than his own in the immediate vicinity of the tent puzzled investigators, as did the fact that he had apparently ventured away from camp without his boots in temperatures that would have approached freezing after sunset. Medical examiners consulted during the investigation noted that hypothermia typically causes disorientation rather than purposeful action, making it unlikely that Thorne would have removed his boots voluntarily if experiencing cold-related impairment. The investigation considered various possibilities: abduction by unknown persons, a psychological break leading to wandering off into the wilderness, or an encounter with an aggressive animal that somehow left no trace evidence. None of these theories could be substantiated with physical evidence, leaving the case officially unresolved. Park rangers interviewed in the aftermath spoke quietly of other unexplained incidents in the same region, encounters with beings that moved with impossible speed through rugged terrain, leaving tracks far exceeding the size of any known species. One anonymous ranger stated in a confidential report, "We've seen things out there that don't fit into any category of wildlife we're trained to recognize. They don't behave like animals, and they certainly don't behave like humans. Most of us learn to keep these observations to ourselves because they don't fit into official reports." Another ranger mentioned finding similar, unusually large footprints in remote areas of the park on multiple occasions, always in regions far from established hiking trails. These accounts, while intriguing, remained anecdotal and couldn't be incorporated into the official investigation without corroborating evidence. The photograph of the humanoid figure, however, provided something tangible that couldn't be easily dismissed as imagination or misidentification. The image was analyzed by experts from various disciplines without reaching a definitive conclusion. Wildlife biologists from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game examined it alongside known wildlife species and found no match. Forensic photographers confirmed its authenticity, but couldn't identify the subject. Even anthropologists familiar with indigenous legends about forest beings couldn't draw direct parallels to the figure captured in Thorne's final photograph. The image eventually found its way to various cryptozoology forums and paranormal investigation websites, where it sparked intense debate and speculation. Within the official investigation, however, it remained an anomaly, a piece of evidence that defied categorization but couldn't be ignored. The National Park Service, sensitive to both public safety and tourism concerns, handled the photograph with particular care, releasing only a low-resolution version to the public while retaining the original for further analysis. Marcus Thorne's family never gave up hope for answers, though they gradually accepted that closure might never come. His sister, Dr. Eleanor Thorne, a forensic anthropologist, conducted her own independent investigation over several years, consulting with experts across multiple disciplines. In a private interview conducted 5 years after her brother's disappearance, she admitted, "I've examined every piece of evidence from every possible angle. As a scientist, I should be able to find a rational explanation. As someone who knew Marcus and his capabilities, I can tell you that whatever happened out there wasn't the result of carelessness or poor preparation. He encountered something that wasn't in any of his guidebooks or training manuals. The family established a scholarship in Marcus's name for students pursuing geological research in extreme environments, ensuring that his passion for wilderness exploration would continue to inspire others despite the mystery surrounding his fate." In Denali National Park's official records, Thorne's case remains filed as Missing Circumstances Unknown, a designation that acknowledges the lack of resolution without speculating about unexplained possibilities. Each September, as the Alaskan wilderness begins its transition into winter, park employees who were part of the original search operation find themselves thinking about the experienced hiker who vanished so completely. The photograph of the mysterious figure continues to circulate in certain circles, occasionally resurfacing in documentaries or articles about unexplained phenomena. For most visitors to Denali, however, the story remains unknown, a footnote in the park's extensive incident logs that doesn't appear in promotional materials or visitor information. The area where Thorne disappeared remains open to the public, with no special warnings beyond the standard advisories about wildlife and weather conditions that all wilderness travelers receive. The enduring mystery of what happened to Marcus Thorne on that September evening in 2014 represents something larger than a single unexplained disappearance. It speaks to the vastness of the Alaskan wilderness and the limits of human knowledge about what might exist in its most remote regions. For those who knew Thorne personally, the absence of answers creates a particular kind of grief that can't be resolved through conventional means of closure. For park rangers and investigators, the case remains a professional anomaly that challenges their understanding of wilderness safety and search procedures. And for those who study unexplained phenomena, the photograph of the figure on the ridge continues to represent compelling evidence that some mysteries resist categorization and explanation. In the end, Marcus Thorne's disappearance joins countless other stories from Alaska's wilderness reminders that even in our modern age of satellite tracking and advanced communication technology, there remain places where humans can still vanish without explanation, leaving behind only questions that echo across the vast, silent landscapes. It was the evening of March 12, 2008, when radio operator Jim Haskins first noticed the anomaly. Working at the remote communications outpost in Unalakleet, Haskins had spent 15 years monitoring emergency frequencies across western Alaska. The job required patience and an ability to distinguish between routine transmissions and genuine distress calls. On this particular night, as a blizzard raged outside his small facility, a signal broke through the static on Channel 16, the International Marine Distress Frequency. What made this transmission unusual was its origin. According to Haskins' sophisticated tracking equipment, the signal was coming from St. Matthew Island, an uninhabited landmass in the Bering Sea that had been abandoned since the early 20th century. The voice that emerged through the crackling interference spoke in a calm, measured tone, reciting what appeared to be meteorological data with impossible precision. Haskins recorded the transmission for 47 minutes before it abruptly ceased. In that time, the voice delivered detailed weather forecasts for the following week, including wind speeds, barometric pressures, and precipitation patterns that would prove remarkably accurate. What troubled Haskins was not just the impossibility of a human presence on St. Matthew Island, but the nature of the information being shared. The forecasts included data points that exceeded the capabilities of any known weather monitoring equipment, including predictions of auroral activity and magnetic field variations. When Haskins reported the incident to his superiors, he was initially met with skepticism. However, when subsequent broadcasts began appearing on the same frequency, always during severe weather events, always originating from uninhabited locations across the Bering Sea region, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration launched a discreet investigation. What they discovered would remain classified for years, though rumors eventually surfaced among Alaska's radio operations community. The investigation, codenamed Project Bering Echo, documented 17 similar transmissions between 2008 and 2012, each following the same pattern: calm voices delivering impossible meteorological data from locations verified to be uninhabited. In 2013, a team sent to investigate St. Matthew Island discovered something extraordinary at the coordinates where Haskins had first detected the signal. Buried beneath permafrost was equipment of unknown origin, powered by a technology that defied conventional explanation. More disturbingly, recent soil analysis suggested the equipment had been installed within the past decade, despite no recorded human presence on the island during that period. The official NOAA report concluded with a recommendation to monitor the transmissions without interference, noting their consistently accurate weather predictions had actually helped save lives during several severe storms. Today, experienced radio operators across western Alaska still listen quietly on Channel 16 during blizzards, sometimes hearing those calm voices delivering forecasts that shouldn't be possible, from places where no humans should be. Dr. Eleanor Ross had dedicated her career to studying auroral phenomena, but nothing in her 20 years of research prepared her for what she would witness in the winter of 2016. Leading a team of 5 researchers at a temporary station established 50 miles north of Utqiagvik, Ross was conducting groundbreaking work on the electromagnetic properties of auroral displays. The expedition, funded by the National Science Foundation, had been planned for 3 years and involved state-of-the-art equipment designed to capture unprecedented data about the northern lights. For the first 3 weeks, everything proceeded according to schedule, with the team collecting valuable information during several spectacular auroral events. It was during the 4th week, on a night when the aurora borealis was particularly active, that something occurred that would challenge everything Ross thought she knew about atmospheric science. The anomaly first appeared as a geometric pattern within the auroral display, perfect squares and triangles forming momentarily in the dancing lights before dissolving back into the natural flow. Ross and her team documented this phenomenon, initially attributing it to an unusual atmospheric condition or equipment malfunction. However, as the night progressed, these patterns became more complex and intentional, eventually resolving into what appeared to be mathematical equations and star charts of impossible accuracy. What truly disturbed the researchers was when one of these patterns replicated a diagram from Ross's own unpublished research notes documents that existed only in her laptop and in a physical notebook locked in her desk back in Fairbanks. As the team frantically checked their equipment for signs of tampering, they noticed something even more unsettling. The temperature inside their research station had dropped by 15 degrees in under 10 minutes, despite their heating system functioning at maximum capacity. The following morning, Ross contacted NSF headquarters to report the incident, carefully omitting the most inexplicable details to maintain her scientific credibility. Within hours, a helicopter was dispatched to evacuate the team. What the rescue party found upon arrival would become part of Alaska's most carefully documented unexplained phenomena files. All research equipment had been systematically disassembled and arranged in precise geometric patterns on the frozen ground. Most disturbingly, several data storage devices had been physically removed from their housings and were nowhere to be found. The official NSF report, filed under incident number ARA 2016-03, concluded with recommendations to establish a permanent monitoring station at the location, though the true purpose of this station remains classified. Several team members left research entirely following the incident, while Dr. Ross relocated to a university position in the lower 48 states, where she occasionally lectures on atmospheric anomalies, though never mentioning the specific details of what her team witnessed in the Alaskan Arctic that winter night. Long-haul trucker Raymond Miller had driven the Dalton Highway more times than he could count. The 414-mile gravel road connecting Fairbanks to Deadhorse and the oil fields of Prudhoe Bay was considered one of America's most dangerous routes. But for Miller, it was just another job. In the winter of 2011, during a particularly brutal cold snap that sent temperatures plummeting to 60 below zero, Miller was hauling a load of essential supplies northbound when he encountered something that would forever change his perspective on the Alaskan wilderness. It was approximately 3:17 a.m. when his CB radio crackled to life with a distress call from another trucker several miles ahead. What made this call unusual was not just the panic in the driver's voice, but what he was describing: something moving alongside his truck on the frozen tundra. Miller slowed his rig as he approached the area where the call had originated, his high beams cutting through the darkness. What he saw would later become the subject of a formal report filed with the Alaska State Troopers. Incident Report 2011-21-24. Another truck sat abandoned in the middle of the road, its driver's door open and engine still running. Miller could see footprints leading away from the vehicle toward the nearby tree line. But what caught his attention was the second set of tracks that didn't belong to any animal Miller had encountered in his 20 years of Alaskan driving. These prints were larger than a human's, with a stride that covered nearly 12 feet with each step. They appeared suddenly beside the truck and followed the driver's tracks for approximately 50 yards before disappearing entirely at the edge of the forest. Miller called for emergency assistance on his satellite phone, then cautiously approached the abandoned vehicle, finding a thermos of still-hot coffee on the dashboard and a half-eaten sandwich on the passenger seat. The search for the missing trucker, whose name was Thomas Wilcox, lasted for 3 days before being suspended due to deteriorating weather conditions. What made the investigation particularly baffling was the discovery of additional evidence that didn't align with any known wildlife or human activity. Forensic analysis of the strange footprints revealed a weight distribution inconsistent with any known species, and thermal imaging scans of the area detected heat signatures that moved with impossible speed through the dense forest. Several other truckers who had driven the same route that night came forward with similar accounts, though most had dismissed what they'd seen as tricks played by sleep deprivation and extreme cold. The official report concluded that Wilcox had likely succumbed to hypothermia after leaving his vehicle, though his body was never recovered. Miller continued driving the Dalton Highway for another 5 years before retiring, though he never again traveled that section of road at night, and always kept his cab doors locked regardless of the temperature outside. In the remote northwest corner of Alaska, the village of Kalina has long been home to unexplained phenomena that local residents have quietly documented for generations. However, it was the discovery of an abandoned settlement 2 miles from the modern village in the spring of 2013 that brought these mysteries to the attention of state authorities. The discovery was made by a team of archaeologists from the University of Alaska Fairbanks who were conducting a survey of ancient Inupiat sites in the region. What they found was not the remnants of an historical village, but something much more recent and perplexing. A small settlement of 8 structures that appeared to have been abandoned within the past decade, despite no official records of any such community existing in that location. The structures themselves were unusual, built with materials that didn't match any known construction techniques used in the region. The architecture featured precise geometric angles and insulation methods that exceeded even modern building standards for Arctic environments. What disturbed the archaeological team most was what they found inside these buildings: personal effects, clothing, and furniture arranged as if occupants had left suddenly, but nothing that could identify who these people were or where they had come from. Most puzzling was the complete absence of any documentation, no papers, photographs, or personal records that typically accompany human settlements. The only clue to the identity of these mysterious inhabitants was a series of symbols carved into the interior walls of each structure, symbols that didn't match any known language or writing system. When the archaeologists reported their discovery to the Alaska State Historic Preservation Office, an official investigation was launched. What authorities discovered during their survey of the site raised more questions than answers. Soil analysis suggested the settlement had been constructed no more than 7 years prior to its discovery, yet satellite imagery of the area from that period showed no signs of construction activity. Even more disturbing was the discovery that several pieces of equipment found in the buildings contained components that weren't commercially available anywhere in the world. Local Inupiat elders, when consulted, spoke of stories passed down through generations about silent people who occasionally appeared in the region, built temporary settlements, and then vanished without explanation. The official investigation concluded with the recommendation to monitor the site for any signs of reoccupation, though funding for such monitoring was never allocated. Today, the settlement stands abandoned, slowly being reclaimed by the Arctic tundra, its origins and the fate of its inhabitants remaining one of Alaska's most unsettling modern mysteries. Pilot Sarah Chen had been flying commercial routes across Alaska for 12 years, but nothing in her experience prepared her for what she would witness while flying over the Brooks Range on a clear summer morning in 2017. Chen was piloting a small commuter plane from Bettles to Anaktuvuk Pass with 4 passengers when she noticed something unusual on one of the remote mountain ridges below. At first, she dismissed it as an unusual rock formation or perhaps the temporary shelter of a remote research team. As she circled for a closer look, however, Chen realized she was observing something that defied conventional explanation. What appeared to be a metallic structure, approximately 50 feet in height, stood on the ridge where no known research facility or settlement existed. Chen contacted air traffic control to report her observation, noting the precise coordinates and describing what she was seeing. The response from the ground was immediate confusion, as no flights were scheduled in that area, and no permanent structures were registered at those coordinates. As Chen continued to observe the object, she noticed something that made her heart race. The structure appeared to be changing shape, its metallic surfaces shifting and reconfiguring in ways that defied known engineering principles. One of her passengers, a geologist familiar with the region, confirmed that no mining operations or research stations were authorized in that area. Chen decided to descend for a closer observation, maintaining what she considered a safe distance while documenting the phenomenon with her phone's camera. The incident was officially documented in FAA Report AL 2017-0489, which included Chen's testimony and the photographs she had captured. What made this case particularly compelling was that a military radar installation located approximately 100 miles away had also detected an unidentified object at the same coordinates during the same time period. When a research team was dispatched to investigate the site 3 days later, they found no trace of any structure or recent human activity. The only evidence that something unusual had occurred was a series of ground markings that didn't match any known vehicle or equipment, and readings of unusual electromagnetic radiation that gradually dissipated over the following week. Chen underwent extensive debriefing by both aviation authorities and military personnel, though she was instructed not to discuss the incident publicly. She continued flying across Alaska for another 3 years before requesting a transfer to routes in the lower 48 states, citing personal reasons. To this day, the photographs she took remain classified, and the official explanation for what she witnessed that day over the Brooks Range remains unidentified atmospheric phenomena. Forest Ranger Michael Torres had worked in the Tongas National Forest for 8 years, patrolling the 16.7 million acres of temperate rainforest in southeast Alaska. In October of 2015, while conducting a routine survey of remote areas near the Canadian border, Torres discovered something that would challenge his understanding of the natural world. It began with unusual animal behavior, an unnerving silence in an area typically teeming with wildlife, followed by the discovery of tracks that didn't belong to any species Torres had encountered in his extensive career. These tracks led him deeper into the forest, toward an area where the vegetation appeared to have been systematically cleared in a perfect circular pattern, approximately 100 feet in diameter. What Torres found at the center of this clearing would become the subject of one of the most carefully documented unexplained phenomena cases in Alaskan history. A series of metallic objects were arranged in a geometric pattern that suggested advanced mathematical understanding. These objects, when tested by the research team that later arrived at the site, were found to be composed of elements not found on the periodic table. Most disturbing was the discovery of what appeared to be a temporary shelter constructed with materials that defied analysis, substances that seemed to change composition when observed under different conditions. Torres immediately reported his discovery to Forest Service headquarters, triggering a response that involved multiple federal agencies and a team of specialists flown in from across the country. The investigation, codenamed Project Tongas Anomaly, lasted for 6 weeks before being abruptly terminated with little explanation. What is known comes from the partial report that was later leaked to a journalist specializing in unexplained phenomena. The report documented the discovery of several items that appeared to be advanced technological devices, though their purpose remained unclear. Even more puzzling were biological samples collected from the site DNA that didn't match any known species on Earth. When the investigation was suddenly terminated, all evidence was removed from the site, which was subsequently declared off-limits for any future research. Torres was transferred to a desk position in Juneau shortly after the investigation ended, where he worked until his retirement 3 years later. In a rare interview given shortly before his death from cancer in 2022, Torres spoke briefly about what he had discovered in the Tongas National Forest, saying only, "I saw things in those woods that changed everything I thought I knew about our world. Some questions are better left unanswered." The official file on the Tongas anomaly remains classified, and the area where Torres made his discovery is now patrolled by private security contractors whose funding source cannot be traced through any government budget. Meteorologist Dr. James Holloway had been stationed at the remote weather research facility on St. Lawrence Island for only 3 months when the unusual phenomena began. Located in the Bering Sea between Alaska and Siberia, the station was designed to collect atmospheric data in one of the world's most extreme environments. Holloway, a recent PhD graduate from the University of Chicago, had welcomed the assignment as an opportunity to conduct groundbreaking research while experiencing the adventure of living in such an isolated location. The station was staffed by a small team of 4 researchers who rotated on 6-month assignments, communicating with the outside world primarily through satellite connections and a weekly supply plane that weather permitted. What Holloway and his colleagues would experience during the winter of 2019 would challenge not just their scientific understanding, but their perception of reality itself. The first anomaly occurred in early November, when the station's sophisticated radar equipment began detecting objects moving through the atmosphere at speeds and trajectories that defied the laws of physics as currently understood. These objects appeared only during severe weather events, when visibility was virtually non-existent, making visual confirmation impossible. Holloway initially attributed these readings to equipment malfunction or unusual atmospheric conditions, but as the phenomena continued with increasing frequency, he began documenting them meticulously. By December, the team had recorded over 300 such events, each more inexplicable than the last. What troubled Holloway most was the pattern these phenomena seemed to follow. They appeared to be responding to the station's own radar signals, almost as if they were deliberately drawing attention to their presence. The situation escalated on January 7, 2020, when a massive storm cut off all communication with the island. For 72 hours, the research team was completely isolated from the outside world. When contact was finally re-established, Holloway and his colleagues reported an experience that would later become the subject of a classified military investigation. According to their testimony, something had approached the station during the height of the storm, something that moved with impossible speed across the frozen terrain and demonstrated abilities that transcended known physical laws. The researchers described seeing shapes that changed form as they moved, leaving behind traces of radiation that registered on their equipment. Most disturbing was their report of hearing sounds, complex patterns that seemed to constitute a form of communication, though one they couldn't begin to decipher. When the supply plane finally landed a week later, it found the research team huddled together in the main facility, their equipment damaged but still functional, and their scientific certainty shattered by what they had experienced. The official report attributed their claims to isolation-induced psychosis, though the extensive data they had collected before the storm told a different story. All 4 researchers left their scientific careers following this incident, and the weather station on St. Lawrence Island was converted to automated operation, with no human presence permitted on the island since. It was the deep winter of 1988 at the Alcan Highway Communications Relay Station, a solitary, prefabricated structure nestled in a pass between 2 nameless mountain ranges. Arthur Finch, a communications technician with 15 years of experience, was midway through a 90-day solo posting. His job was to maintain the relay equipment that kept the remote highway connected to the outside world, a task that required methodical precision and tolerance for profound isolation. The station was a small universe of humming servers and blinking lights, its constant electronic thrum a familiar companion against the howl of the wind outside. Finch had handled such postings before. The solitude was a feature, not a bug, of the job. He was a man who found comfort in predictable systems and the logical order of circuits and frequencies. What he began hearing on the 3rd week of his shift, however, defied every principle of his profession. It started as a faint whisper on the emergency broadcast frequency, a channel that should have been silent. At first, Finch attributed it to atmospheric skip, a common phenomenon where radio signals travel farther than intended. But the voice did not fade and return like a distant station. It remained steady, a child's voice softly reciting a series of numbers. As Finch adjusted the gain on his receiver, a cold realization washed over him. The numbers were not random, They were the serial numbers of the backup power generators housed in the room directly below him. He scanned the other frequencies, finding the voice nowhere else. It was isolated to that one channel, speaking information that no one outside this facility, and certainly no child, could possibly know. The professional detachment that had served him for years began to fracture. Over the next 2 days, the phenomenon escalated. When Finch ran a diagnostic on the primary transmitter, the child's voice on the emergency channel calmly recited the voltage readings and error codes as they appeared on his screen, milliseconds before he could process them himself. It was as if the station itself had found a voice, and that voice was watching him work. The fear was not loud or violent, but a quiet, creeping dread that settled deep in his bones. He stopped his routine maintenance, unwilling to provoke whatever intelligence was observing him. The station, once his sanctuary of predictable order, now felt like an elaborate trap. The climax came on a Tuesday night during a blizzard that sealed the station in a tomb of white. The radio was silent, but Finch heard the voice clearly now, not through speakers but from the maintenance closet at the end of the hall. It was a faint, dry whisper, reciting his own name and employee ID number. Finch did not investigate. He did not call for help on the radio, fearing the voice might answer. He simply sat in his chair, listening to the wind and the whisper until the storm passed 40 hours later. He filed his report, incident number Alcan COM 88B4, upon his relief's arrival. The official investigation found no equipment malfunction and no rational explanation for his claims. A psychologist suggested extreme isolation-induced auditory hallucinations. Finch was quietly transferred to a desk job in Anchorage and never worked in the field again. The relay station remained operational for 2 more years before being fully automated. No technician ever spent a winter there again. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable, but nowhere is this truth more evident than in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness. The stories we've explored tonight represent only a fraction of documented encounters in America's last frontier. What connects these accounts is not just their geographic setting, but the credibility of witnesses, people whose livelihoods depend on understanding the natural world and distinguishing between ordinary dangers and something else entirely. What makes these Alaskan tales particularly disturbing is not just their content, but the official responses. Careful documentation followed by classification, investigations terminated without conclusion, and witnesses whose lives were forever changed. From researchers abandoning careers to pilots transferring routes, these encounters left indelible marks on those who experienced them. Common threads emerge: unusual tracks, objects moving with impossible speed, communications from uninhabited locations suggesting phenomena beyond our current understanding. These documented stories likely represent only a fraction of experiences, with countless others remaining private memories or shared quietly within isolated communities. Indigenous peoples have long spoken of such phenomena, passed down through generations as warnings. Modern experts occasionally stumble upon these same mysteries, though their reports often become classified or dismissed. These encounters remind us that despite technological advances, aspects of our world operate beyond comprehension. They serve as humbling reminders of how much we have yet to understand about our world and possibly others. If you or someone you know has a true story to share, leave it in the comments below. The documentation of these phenomena depends on those brave enough to share their experiences. Thank you for watching Sleepless Campfire. Until next time, stay safe out there.